I'd like to wish a very warm welcome to everyone who's joined us this morning. This event is organised as part of our Year of Childhood, as we've been on a mission to revive our Unfearties as a movement. And today's event, we'll be starting with a discussion between Cathy, Clare and Maff, who you've just all heard, and they will be considering what makes a movement. Following their conversation, we'll move into the breakout rooms for further conversations and a fun activity that will motivate our movement. So because we're quite short on time, I'm very excited and quickly going to introduce our very inspirational speakers. So we have with us today Cathy McCulloch. She's the co-director of Children's Parliament and our original Unfeartie. 2017 was a very special year because Cathy was awarded an OBE for her services to children's rights, and the idea of the Unfearties was born to celebrate the Children's Parliament's 21st birthday. Clare MacGillivray is also a passionate Unfeartie and a trustee of Children's Parliament. She's a founder and director of Making Rights Real and is committed to supporting communities to use the power of human rights to make social and economic change. And finally, we have Maff Potts, who is the founder of Camerados. He joins the conversation not as an Unfeartie, but because he believes that real social change comes from social movements. Maff comes from a mental health and homelessness background. He turned the Millennium Dome into a homeless shelter, rewrote the UK government's policy for homeless centres, and oversaw the building of £170 million worth of homeless projects. I think he'll be incredibly inspiring. We've just heard his piano playing and we're really excited to hear more about the Camerados and your ideas about movements. So we're going to start, I think, with Cathy. Would you like to share the background story of Unfearties for us, please?
Yeah, sure. So welcome everybody. It's great to see so many folk in the call, and that was just the best opening ever to anything we've ever done, Maff. Thank you very much. We're definitely going to have to get you back. I hope you don't have other work planned in your diary because you're going to be busy. So I think, first of all, to say that working in the area of children's human rights is, well, it's a number of things. It's interesting, it's challenging, it's frustrating, it's lonely sometimes. This is an area of work that's pretty poorly understood. In fact, it's often misunderstood, misrepresented. People run a mile often when they hear the term. There's a lot of fear around it, and generally folk think that's all we need. Kids are going to be telling us what to eat for breakfast. They're not doing homework, and we're not going on holiday unless we go to Alton Towers every second month. And so we've worked across Scotland, many communities with lots of amazing people. And what we found was that when we were running our projects and programmes, we came across folk who were really inspiring themselves and who loved what we did. So we have always named our work a rights-based approach. That's what we do. We've always been really upfront about it. But because it's been so hard, we've had to get to build relationships with individuals within different places and communities across Scotland so that we can demonstrate what we do and how we do it. And our hope was that once people see the impact it has on children, they're going to go, wow, we want to do that too. And of course, some people did want to do that, but actually the structure and the systems in Scotland are really difficult. So people would leave a project, or we would leave them, and they would say, I'm definitely going to keep this going, this is amazing. And they would find it really difficult because the culture that surrounded them just didn't support a way of working that is rights-based, sadly. And so the people that we connected with, they all had the same traits. It was all about rooting the work in kindness, trust, empathy and respect for children's human dignity. So that sort of culture of reward and punishment that is so prevalent in Scottish education and in Scottish society is just a really, really hard nut to crack. And hopefully the education review that's happening just now, that's got a really wide, broad range of bodies and individuals involved in it, will bring something new to the table on that. And then across Scotland, we were coming across folk from really unusual places who were really getting it. So we were starting to see more and more people getting it. And there was a shopkeeper in the Western Isles who just said, children's rights, this is brilliant. I had no idea that's what it was, because he saw kids hosting workshops, running events themselves, talking about children's rights, seeing it in the local paper. And I thought, wow, you know, you stopped me in the shop one day and said, this is brilliant, just not what I expected. A forester who was working with children in Dunkeld, he was the dad of one of the kids we were working with, and he came along to get involved. He saw this of energy and enthusiasm and the really brilliant ideas the kids had, along with their commitment to their community. And he thought, this is brilliant, he'd never seen this before. And he is now, 4 years later, really pushing the local community council to engage children from that time with their mural and new children to input their views into what's happening into the local community. And he's an Unfeartie, and he's on the website, and his fluorescent jacket and his hard hat and his Unfeartie sign. And then a community planning partner manager he was tasked with getting us bread and lunch and all the practical stuff for our project, was in every day seeing what was happening and just thought, this is amazing. And he said, it's helped me be a better dad, because it's helped me listen and understand what my kids need from me in terms of relationships.
Brilliant.
And so these people were just they were there, and I was sitting late one night in the office thinking, how do we connect all these people up? Because actually what we're talking about is culture shift, isn't it? It's all very well, all this individual practice changing, but we all need to be signed up to something that's going to form some kind of energy and dynamism in order that we can collectively come together and look at the challenges and share experiences with each other. And I was looking through a Scots dictionary, and I came across the word feart. And I've always really liked the word, and I thought, you know, that's it. Talking about children's rights, being alongside children, even defending children sometimes is difficult. You have to be a bit brave to stand up against the sort of overwhelming tide of rights, responsibilities, you know, do as you're told. That sort of legacy of children should be seen and not heard. And I thought, well, what if people weren't feared? What would they be then? If they weren't feared, they would be unfeared. Is that a word? I don't know if it's a word. Can we make it a word? And so I checked it out with a few people, and I'm not very sure about that. And then John Carnachan, who wasn't very sure about it, suddenly said, actually, yeah, okay. And I said, well, will you be our chief Unfeartie then? And he went, yeah, okay. So that sort of happened really, really quickly. And people it's just people liked it. And I think the thing that I've seen is that people really like to feel that they're connected to something that feels a bit different. It feels vibrant. It feels a bit radical, but you don't have to put your head above the parapet and be at risk of being shot down if you don't want to be. There's a certain, there's a certain safety in it, and there's safety in numbers as well. And before I finish, I would just like to say that on my screen, I can see Teresa Casey, who is an original Unfeartie, and she was involved in the very, very first project that Colin and I ran, and Stuart is there as well. He's still on the team. He's never escaped. But Teresa was an original Unfeartie, and I think, and she's still involved in Children's Parliament. And so the support that you gave us, Teresa, in 1992 with the kids, and the work that you've done all the way through has meant that you have often had to be an Unfeartie, even, you know, when we didn't have such a thing. And so it's just it's great to see you here today. So that's the story of how Unfearties came about, and it's just amazing that we've got here in our year of childhood and our 25th birthday, and we've got Maff involved along with the fabulous Claire. So I'm really excited about today and looking forward to further chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Cathy.
You're on mute, Matt. You're going to have to unmute for the drama bits. Right, I'm going to expect that every single time I say anything now from now on in my life.
Wait till you hear what he says when he's no happy.
Watch out.
Thank you, Cathy, for that introduction. So now it is over to Maff. Maff, we'd love to hear your thoughts about how to create and inspire a movement. We're really looking forward to hearing about your mistakes and your successes. So over to you.
Well, thanks for having me. I want to be an Unfeartie. Can I be an Unfeartie?
Yes.
Yeah. Right, can I have a badge? I want a big one like that. Your badges are much bigger than ours. I love it. We went for a little 25mm badge, but you've gone full, like, I don't know what that is. It's huge. You can't have a movement without a badge. That's one thing I would say to you. You have to have a badge. Thank you very much for having me. I'm sat at home here down in Oxford, but I am originally from the borders. I was keen to stress, and my mum's Scottish, so I'm trying to curry favour with a few of you there. I think really all I can say is I'd like to show you a few pictures so you can see what we've been up to. But I mean, I would love to say that I woke up one morning and thought, I know what you have to do to change the world. You have to set up a movement. The truth is that I'm one of those people who doesn't really get the message until he's made mistakes constantly again and again for about 20 years. And then I might just get the message. And that was me, really. I did the wrong thing for about 20 years. I went where the bad energy was, because I think it's my Catholic upbringing. I thought that's what you did. You went where the bad energy was, full of guilt and shame in the wilderness, and you changed the heathens' minds and you brought them to... And the truth is, of course, is all you end up doing is getting scars on your back and getting nowhere. What you've got to do is you've got to go where the good energy is, which is why Cathy mentioned Teresa, because you've got to go to find the Teresas of this world, and then things happen, you see. But it took me far too long to learn that. So that was one big thing I would say straight off the bat. And what I thought you did was you joined organizations or the government and you became more important and got more status, and that's how you changed the world. So that's what I did for 20 years, and of course discovered that isn't how you make long-lasting change. You can make some change until the administration changes 4 years later and everybody changes because they can't possibly agree with the minister who went before them, or the policy changes, or the funding program changes, or the spending review changes, or the personalities and their egos change, and you are on the sea of change there, and your cause is entirely dependent on that stuff. And so I tried this organizational method for 20 years, and I was chief exec of various charities, pretty much always in homelessness, but as you all probably know, homelessness includes mental health, domestic violence, addiction, and a whole flurry of issues. So I ran the biggest homeless provider in the UK. I ran a lot of hostels in Scotland. I used to come to Glasgow Queen Street a lot, Glasgow Central, and I used to walk down to the Clyde to see a massive homeless hostel I used to run. And I did, yes, I advised the government, and I spent £175 million worth of your money building homeless centres. And what I discovered was, having built all these and spent all the money, a few years later, they all went back to being places of despair. And we'd built them, calling them places of change, and given them lots of activities and stuff to turn people's lives around. But people's hearts and minds weren't in it. And as soon as the administration changed and the funding changed, I went back to visit some of the multi-million pound places I'd built. And, the social enterprise room was empty. It contained chairs and furniture. It was a storage facility. The corridors were all, dark and lonely again. And so nothing had changed. And so I guess what I'm saying is I've tried social change the traditional way, and it didn't last. So I thought, right, I want to do something different then. So upstairs in my bedroom, I thought I'm going to try the movement approach. And then just to underline the fact that I'm capable of making nothing but mistakes, I spent 6 months trying to do it, launch a movement about human connection on my own. So obviously I got nowhere. But then finally I twigged, right, yes, other people. So I got an old friend involved. I really do suggest you get an old friend involved, because they tell you when you're being an idiot much quicker than anybody else. So that's good. She's now the boss of Camerados, because it turned out that another thing about starting a movement is never let the founder run it, because they're a nightmare. All they think about for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week is the movement, and that's quite difficult to be managed by that. So Jenny took over. She sat me down about 18 months in and said, "Darling, you're a total nightmare. Everyone hates you." So she took over, and since she took over, it's been much better. Anyway, I'm just going to show you some pictures. Hold on a second. If I go here, tell me if you can see some kids and a blackboard. Can you give me a thumbs up? Okay. You might want to move your little Zoom menu to the bottom of your screen in order to see all the pictures. Essentially, Camerados is about when life is pants, what gets you through, when it's about tough times. And what I learned over 20 years of working in homelessness was that what doesn't get you through is housing. It's very important, but it doesn't turn things around. Employment, really, really useful, doesn't actually turn everything around for you. When you're completely at the edge of life, people don't talk a lot about housing and work. They talk about the people that matter to them and things that put fire in the belly. I'm about to run out of battery. Hold on a second. Oh, there we go. So I told you I'm full of mistakes. There we go. So we realize that what gets you through is actually friends and purpose. It's what gets you through. It's what gets me through. What gets everyone through. And you get friends and purpose by looking out for each other. So we've set up these things called public living rooms, and communities are now running them all over the country and now all over the world. This is in a little cafe in Middlesbrough every Wednesday. This is in a community centre in Oxford. That's in Baltimore, just by the station in downtown Baltimore in the USA. That's in Glasgow, on the pavement, in the streets of Glasgow. That's in the back streets of Middlesbrough. People sitting in their public living room, looking out for each other and getting friends and purpose and getting through a tough time. That is a teepee in a hospital. Now you're thinking, why is that there? Well, we started putting public living rooms in hospitals, but people didn't really know what on earth these sofas and fairy lights were doing. They just walked straight past them. So we really had to make a statement. So we put these teepees up. I'm going to tell you a little bit later about a massive mistake that happened with these teepees and how much we learnt from it. But sometimes they couldn't fit teepees, so we used igloos. And inside, yep, nurses, doctors, hospital staff, patients are looking out for each other. We had a cancer surgeon come in one day and say, I think I need this place, I'm not coping. And a patient from the ward got up and said, do you need a cuddle, love? And he laughed, and she gave the surgeon a hug. And they chatted for 10 minutes, and then he went back on his shift, feeling a bit better. I don't think you get many places where the power shift works like that. This is one they built in Northern Ireland because they didn't have room inside for a teepee. So bless them, they worked with people who suffer from mental health locally, and they built a public living room outside. Amazing. Now, you see it says pop-up living room, SU. What that stands for Student Union. Our busiest public living room is in Bristol. 700 students a day use it. There's been 11 suicides in Bristol in 2 years amongst the student population. They realised they had to do something. But people didn't go to the student welfare officer. They didn't go to the mental health officer because people forget that when you're in dire straits, it requires an enormous amount of confidence to go and get help. So we created a public living room where you wander in and you're just alongside people, and they're getting 700 a day. This is Sheffield, FE College. That's Piccadilly Circus. We didn't get moved on in Piccadilly Circus. We certainly did in Trafalgar Square, though, but that's another story. And this is the Brooklyn Bridge. And at the back there, that's a female NYPD officer who came marching towards us, and we thought, oh, no, here we go. And then, bless her, she joined in, loved the idea, and she stayed with us, chatting for ages. What we do is this is the point I want to make to you about movements, is we don't do it. I've only got a team of 7, and half of them are part-time, and we work out of a shed just down the road. So we obviously don't do all this. It's the movement who does all this. We do 3 things. We inspire, resource, and connect. Inspire people to do it, resource them with this box, and connect them to each other. So we put everything we'd learned, all the mistakes, into a box. And I don't know if you remember the Betty Crocker cake mix kits, where you just add an egg. Yeah, well, don't add an egg to this. That'd be very messy. But all you do with this is you add people and furniture. That's it, and you're off. Now, children is what we're here to talk about today. I don't know if you can see, but this is Coleridge Primary in Rotherham. And it's one of the most multicultural places I've ever been. Also, I don't know if you remember the Rotherham child abuse scandal, but most of the children involved in the child abuse scandal are now parents, and they send their kids here. So as you can imagine, issues to do with safeguarding and children's services aren't popular with many of the parents at this school. It's a potentially highly volatile school, and these kids are the greatest camerados in our movement. They inspire me more than anyone else, and that's just absolutely true. They've started this Camerado of the Week thing. They've started something called Camerados Cadets. They completely live and breathe the principles. And when I went to see them and do an assembly, these 300 kids walked into the hall, and I was quite intimidated. But I needn't have bothered, because this little kid at the front said, "Hello, I'm Mohammed. What's your name? And what do you do? This is my sister. What are we going to do today? Oh, I like your badge." We're off, you know, and no inhibitions, no prejudices. I'm open and I'm listening, and they got the principles of Camerados way quicker than adults did, and it was a big lesson for me, I tell you. Now I'm going to very quickly, before I shut up, and I'm sorry, Jess, I'm rabbiting on. I'm just going to quickly tell you about what happened in the pandemic. All our public living rooms had to close overnight. Try imagining you're running a movement all about reducing social distance between people, and then a global pandemic hits which says everybody has to be socially distanced. It was literally as if the whole pandemic had been invented to destroy Camerados. That's what it felt like to us. So we had to do something. A lot of people still very isolated out there. So one of the benefits of a movement is that we don't have to have all the ideas, because what you do is you just say to the movement, we don't know what to do. Any ideas? And of course, what you do is you have a management team of 1,000. And a member in Berlin said, we run our business online. And she helped us start Spoon Room, which is an online Zoom call where you turn up with a spoon. It's slightly silly, which breaks the ice, but also it's a talking stick. And when you want to speak, you wave your spoon, because if you've ever tried having a conversation on Zoom, you know what a nightmare that is. It's kept people company all through the pandemic, and there's now a Spoon Room in Germany. There's one in Portuguese. There's one in Hawaii. And this is how you do the movement thing. You just give the idea away. We ran a live stream TV show over Christmas to keep people company over a very lonely time at Christmas. People were dancing, doing party games. It was very funny. We run house parties where we have DJs and people zoom in to the house party and dance in their kitchen. And you've got like 100 people dancing in their kitchen. It's fantastic. Please come. Bring your sequined cape with you. This didn't work really. Midday meander. We were desperate to reach people who didn't have Wi-Fi and couldn't come on Zoom, so we started these midday meanders. I say it didn't work. They're big in Derby and big in Falkirk, bizarrely, but not many other places have done it. I don't really know why. Park Life was meant to be for people who are less mobile. I'm not entirely sure a single one has run, so that didn't really work. This worked, and I'll finish with this. We went into the streets wearing enormous pants to highlight, when life is pants, what gets you through. Camerados on the streets, and we went to these towns, and we just made mischief in the streets with pants. And we got passers-by to wear pants, and we did TikTok dances with kids and flash mob dances, and we got people to answer that question, which they did in their droves. So I'm so sorry for rabbiting on for so long. That was meant to be shorter. But there you go, that's me.
Yeah, that was...
Yourself had bum, 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 bum.
Oh!
Yeah, that's amazing. Claire and Cathy, I'm wondering what you make of all of that. I love the pants, by the way. That looks like great fun.
I've got my big badge, but I feel like I need my big pants.
Yeah. Claire, how do you think that relates to the Unfearties movement?
I think it's awesome. I think it's definitely something that we need to think about, you know, in terms of how do we inspire people right at the grassroots to be able to chat about children's rights. You know, I think from my experience, I know I can maybe give you a wee bit about why I got involved in the Unfearty movement. And that was really inspired by children. What Maff said is awesome. I was involved in Trinent in a programme with the children's human rights defenders, who Cathy and her team from Trinent were taken out to Geneva as part of the UN Day of General Discussion. And I was asked to go along and help out just for a couple of sessions, and got absolutely hooked because the kids were awesome. They made these brilliant big children's human rights defenders shields, which they took with them to Geneva, and were able to explain, oh, there's one, Stuart's got one, can we zoom in on Stuart? There's a big shield, and they took these to Geneva, but they've created them in their local community in Trinent, and we're talking to adults about how they experience their rights in their local community. And I got absolutely hooked by that. And the kids introduced me to this, which if you haven't seen, the Little Book of Promises, which the Children's Parliament have produced, and it's about all the children's rights that they can hope to achieve in their life. And so I was led to the children's movement, children's rights movement, by children. And what happened to me then was that I'm involved with Fosside Women's Group, and Lynn's here. Lynn, give us a wave. Mrs. Fantouche, and Cathy was involved, and Lorraine is here somewhere as well, and Katie as well. So in our wee local community in Trinent, we were just blown away by children who were involved in human rights work. And we've been organising International Women's Day festivals maybe for what, 8 or 9 years, and it had all been adults, until Faith and Megan bounded up to us. Faith and Megan were 2 girls who were involved in the Children's Human Rights Defenders movement in Trinent, and said, hey, by the way, it's no fair that your women's group is only for women. We're girls, we're going to be women, and all the issues that you're talking about are things that actually affect us. So when I say they bounded up, if you've met Faith and Megan, they literally did bound up and say, right, we're wanting to be involved in this. And I think as adults, I certainly didn't appreciate that they would want to be involved in some of the things that we were talking about, you know, some of the bigger issues. And the first session that they came along to, they just took over the entire event, and they were facilitating discussions around misogyny, around poverty, around period poverty, around what's it like to be shamed when you have to go to school and you don't have sanitary products. What does that feel like when you've actually got to ask for that in school? And I was so glad that we were proved wrong that children can't talk about those issues, because they completely led us to be talking around those bigger issues. So the first event then that they facilitated, they were talking about misogyny at school, and I was like, 12 and 13-year-olds, do they really want to be talking about stuff like this? But they were talking about the sexual harassment that they get at school. They were talking about aspirations which weren't as high for girls as for boys at school. We had one young girl who said that when she talked in her class about wanting to be a pilot, that she was told by the careers officer that she couldn't be a pilot, that girls are actually air hostesses and not pilots. And I was like, oh my God, really, in this day and age? And so the girls then started talking about that, how they could actually influence that, how they could influence the school to make a different approach. So for me, having those girls involved was just phenomenal to be able to shift what was happening locally. And for me, it's about adults taking that responsibility as Unfearties to say, you know what, it's not right that children's rights are affected in that way. And thank goodness for Faith and Megan, who absolutely proved us wrong, and then have been beacons of support for other girls who want to get involved. So over the past 3 or 4 years that they've got involved, then other girls have got involved, and they've kind of mentored and supported them to take up their place in the movement, which is just awesome to see, you know. And that whole idea of holding people close and loving them and being there for them and supporting them when they're talking about these difficult issues has just been beautiful to watch. So for me, like, the idea of the children's rights movements and being an Unfeartie is about adults standing up for those rights. And we've been challenged in Trinent so that it's you know, that phrase about about a community raising children, but actually in our community it was children who were raising the community. It was their challenge that were saying to us, you know what, you're not doing good enough for us, you're not doing well enough, and you need to be doing differently. And I'll give you a wee practical example. Sorry, Maff, I'm rabbiting on as well. But I'll give you a really practical example about standing up for children's rights. Is that I was in my local hairdressers in Trent one day when all the kids from high school were out on the street, and they were at Greg's buying their sausage rolls and everything, eating their lunches, and they were waving in at the window because my son and his pals were there waving in at the window. And the hairdresser tore off outside and started shouting at them and saying, "You're always swarming over the streets and you're eating your lunches. It's intimidating for adults to see this swarm of kids." And actually the bairns weren't doing anything. They were just having a bit of fun, making fun of me sitting in my chair because it was my son and all his pals. And actually one of the kids turned round and said, "You know what, do you know how intimidating it is walking down the street when all the adults are going to the bingo at night? Actually, that's quite intimidating as well." So, you know, for me, it was a perfect opportunity to talk about, actually, this time belongs to our children. It's their children, that they need to feel safe to be able to eat their lunch without being shouted at, without being made to feel unwelcome. So I guess for me, the Unfearty movement is a real opportunity for all of us to look at our everyday spaces and think, right, where can I make a difference? What can I do here to bring people together to chat about children's rights in your own family, in your community, in your workplace? How can children's rights be defended? What do I need to know to be able to support kids? And I suggest you start here with a wee book of promises, and get some bairns in your own life chatting about, actually, what is it that we need you to do as adults, so that it's the children who are raising the adults to make a community better for them. So that's my kind of aspiration, is that I really hope that all of us who are here can use our sphere of influence and whatever we're doing, whether we're teachers or whether we're parents or grandparents or neighbours, to talk about children's rights and really do what we can to make them real for children, because it's in those everyday places that rights make a difference to children. When they're out in the street in Greg's eating their sausage rolls, they didn't want to be shouted at. Absolutely. So that's me, have a bit of a rant. You can Maff, you can do a wee ranty thing.
That was brilliant.
Over to you, Carmel.
Yeah, that was a great rant. I loved it. I love how we've moved from pants to sausage rolls, but it's it's all really, really interesting. So I think from what I'm listening to, there's lots of really good ideas about how we bring the Unfearties together and create this movement to champion children's rights. I wondered if what you all think about what's important and what would help Unfearties in the movement feel confident to take part and to be active as an Unfearty.
For me, it's stuff about having fun. You know, the stuff that we do at Forsyth Women and Girls Group is actually about chaos. It's absolute chaos, and allowing that chaos to happen and not be too restrictive makes it fun. You know, it's actually about people themselves knowing what they can do and having a chum along the road to be able to chat about. This is how we started, you know, with me and Lynn and Katie and maybe one other person, to say, actually, let's just start something here. Let's just do something that's a bit mad, you know, and be led by the kids. And, you know, it was just awesome for us to have a bit of chaos and be led by the kids and not have to feel like you're in control, but also recognizing that you need to give up power, you know. So quite often in conversations, I'll see like the adults will have the power and the kids don't have the power. And we were quite actively going, nah, it needs to be the other way about, because we're old fuddy-duddies and they ken what's much more fun than we do. So, you know, it is about that confidence to just have a bit of chaos and have a bit of fun.
I think all those things that you've just said are the things that terrify adults in terms of children's rights agenda, because they think it is going to be chaotic and it's going to be, you they're going to lose power and kids are going to be running riot. And so we've got to find, I really liked we've used teepees and yurts and so forth, and creating unusual spaces, just creating spaces where you allow the power dynamic to change a wee bit, because it doesn't look like you would expect it to look. So it's not about sitting in rows, it's not about the adults having responsibility, it's about making sure children have opportunities to hold the space, to demonstrate what they can do. But your places, Maff, that are just welcoming and open and unstructured, and people don't have to have a reason to be going in. I think movements need to be places where people feel safe. It doesn't mean they're not challenged sometimes, but initially I think from children's human rights perspective, people need to feel it's a safe space so they can ask the questions that they think people would expect them to know or understand. And actually, why would they? This is new for most folk.
And asking daft questions is great. I'm absolutely queen of that, because I don't know loads of stuff. So I just tend to ask. And what I loved about the kids in Trinent was that they knew the answers. And it was brilliant. If you just enable children to have that space where they've got a voice, and the voice isn't contested and that you're telling them to sit down and sit straight. Actually, no, give them a beanbag, let them chill out and veg out and, chat about the stuff that they want to chat about. I love that, the chaos that comes with working with children, because they're so inspiring. They really are.
I think just the last thing I would say is that what you're talking about in Trinent, Claire, was really moving, actually, because what I witnessed was two girls who were coming along a bit nervous to maybe show a few people the shields. And what happened was, because they felt so welcomed and embraced by the women in that room, they then actually ran the whole show. They had the microphones, they were going around the tables. Somebody said, what do your parents think about this? And they said, hang on a minute. And they went over and they dragged their mums along and they put the microphones to their mums and said, what do you think? And their mums were kind of looking terrified, and they would never have been in that space. They wouldn't have come along to that had it not been for the girls dragging them along. And it was just amazing to see how the faces on the women looking at these girls and thinking, these are our girls. These are ours. They belong here. And to feel the children, the girls feeling as if they were in that safe space with a blanket wrapped around them was just enormous. It was huge. I really felt that really, really strongly. Maff.
Oh no, I guess I'd just add that we learn a lot of behaviours when we become adults that unfortunately actually exist as barriers to connecting with other people, and barriers for people to feel they can talk. And kids don't have these barriers. So I would just from the mistakes we made, I would attend to the small details. So if you advertise a meeting publicly for people to come along to, what you tend to do is attract people who attend meetings. So what we do is we advertise pizza because everybody likes pizza. And so, and we kind of get people to come who wouldn't normally talk, and we don't really do notices. I mean, we did early on. There's a famous story where we ran a public living room in Camden, just off the street in a park, and people were constantly coming in saying, what is this? And instead of being comfortable with them just talking and not knowing and the uncertainty, me being a former CEO and fixer, I had to go and make a notice on what it was. This is a place for human connection. And then they still weren't getting it. So I bought another notice. I had 10 blackboards, and my final blackboard was 10 feet high with black paint. So these are the mistakes, right? You don't make these mistakes, okay? You don't need notices. You just need people to tell stories. And this was the big thing, is that movements and revolutions grow on the tongues of poets. They don't grow in strategic plans. Okay, so it's music and poetry and stories that come alive. So when someone walked into the teepee in the hospital and they saw a postcard that said, I've just said goodbye to my husband for the last time on the cardiac ward, and I came in here and I met a woman, a stranger, and she got me through the night. When you read that story, well, you know what the place is for, don't you? But if the notice said, please connect with other humans because this increases people's, wouldn't work. You need stories. You know, you need Robbie Burns. You know, you need a movement voice. You know, so stories we worked, yeah, and language. And I'll shut up after this. But the language was a big one. We outside the public living room in one of the hospitals. We had A-frames. Well, outside all of them actually, and it just said, "Come in, chat, be a camarado." And a bit like Unfearty, no one really knows what it means, so they just come in, you know, and they kick off their shoes. But one hospital couldn't resist it, and they rubbed out the chalk, and they wrote, "It's time to talk, # Mental Health Awareness Week." And the infrared beam that we have on the hidden on the TP, which counts people in and out, previously with our sign was getting 1,000 people a week. But when they changed it to # Mental Health Awareness Week, we counted 40. So that shows you the power of language. People won't come in if they think they're going to be done to or whatever, you know, and that's why language, stories, the environment you create, pizza. What this says to people is it's for you as well, and have permission to join in, you know, instead of sit in a row and be quiet.
I think what the Children's Parliament does really well is that environment is created by and for children, you know, and I think the events that we've had in Tranent, certainly when we did an event about housing rights for kids, we're like, gosh, how are we going to make this live for housing rights? So the kids said, well, let's just have a sleepover in the hall. So they all brought their sleeping bags. And we had snacks. Okay, what kind of snacks are we having? Well, actually, they need to be vegetarian because in terms of environmental rights, which impact on children in different parts of the world, well, we need to not be adding to the global footprint. So they had, you know, vegetarian pizza rather than, you know, meaty pizzas and things like that. And they were able to, what was astonishing was they were able to connect different rights. They were talking about the right to health. Well, actually, if you're homeless, how are you going to get a GP surgery if you don't have an address? And they were talking about all this stuff in a sleepover. They built their own like little shelters in the environment that they were in as well. And for me, that was such a rich discussion that then we were able to feed into the Scottish Parliament as well, and their stuff around homelessness at a strategic level. But the kids were coming up with the answers around actually what do we need to do to support people who are living in those circumstances, and what about the children who are living in those circumstances? What do we need to do about that? And they were just awesome. And I think that environment, you're right, is so important to just enable that creativity to come and not to try to control what's going on. Makes it for much more fun as well as, you know, more impactful learning.
But I think all the things you're describing are potential for adults to be very scared about disagreement and argument, and therefore might not mention it, whereas kids don't have a problem with that. So we have 6 principles in Camerados, which we suddenly realized we had to bring in, because when we opened public living rooms, they didn't just become places of mutual aid. We thought everyone would just look out for each other. It didn't happen. You know what did happen? Cliques started to form, little power, you know, this is our table, that's your table, who's in charge, who's the boss. And we realized we needed some principles to create this mutual aid. And some of the adults really struggle with these principles, one of which is it's completely okay to disagree with someone and hold a different, you know. So adults really struggle with this one, especially when you talk about Brexit or anything, you know, Donald Trump or whatever. Kids, when I said to the kids in the schools, so if you want to play a different game from another kid in the playground and they don't want to play the game you're playing, you know, and you disagree, does that mean you just don't like them anymore? And kids looked at me like I was stupid. And they went, well, no, obviously. Well, unfortunately, adults, I don't know when it happened to put the state of public discourse, but if you disagree with someone, I can't like you anymore. I mean, that is where we're at right now, worse than ever now. Kids just do not have that burden. And you know, mixing with people who are not like you, we, as adults, we self-select. If you're a Cafe Nero person, you're probably not a Kentucky Fried Chicken person. You know, we self-select where we go, Yates Wine Lodge, All Bar One, you know, all this, right? But kids, they'll play with anyone, you know, and so a lot of our principles, and you can find them on our website, really struggle. A lot of adults really struggle with them. But kids, they just really don't have that problem. if I could just say one funny one, which is one of our principles is about no fixing, something I really struggle with. My wife has said I've set up a social movement based on everything I'm rubbish at. But one of our principles is no fixing. Okay, so a Camerados public living room is a place of no outcomes, right? We're not getting in each other's faces with an intervention. We're just alongside each other. And of course, what happens is people are then not robbed of their agency, and through the conversation, they find a solution. The problem is, for 20 years, I got in their face and gave them a needs and risk assessment and told them what to do. So we create places of no outcomes. Anyway, we said to the kids, what would you say to someone if they're crying in the playground and you go along to them, because adults would go and try and fix it. What would you do? And the kids say, I would go up and say, howdy, 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 howdy. And you know what? That would work for me. And another one said, hey, I like your teeth. These are not things that adults would think of, right? Because an adult would say, you need an intervention and I need to make a referral. And you know what? That person's having a really rubbish day. That isn't the first thing they want to hear. So anyway, have a look at our principles, but you won't be amazed, I'm sure, to see that kids find them much, much easier to deal with.
And that just reflects the culture that we all live and grow and work in, doesn't it? And I think your thing about no fixing is actually really important, and I love that way of putting it, because I think what happens at events where we bring children and adults together to have conversations, they do tend to be more equal because the children have had time to get to a place where they've had time to think about what they think. So, it's not just about giving children information and telling them, tell us something about that. They actually have time to explore it, to talk to one another about it, to make something, to be creative as part of that process. And then the children invite adults into the space. And the adults, it's not about fixing it, it's about listening, it's about having conversations. And because it's quite, what's the word? It's quite leveling, disempowering in a positive way for adults to come into a space where children are clearly holding the space. They're saying, welcome, nice to see you, here's your badge. Where would you like to sit? There's where you'll get tea and coffee. We're just going to start in a minute. There's the toilets. They're actually demonstrating that they can from the very, very beginning. And the adults are not stepping in to mediate, to control, to say you can't say that, to make sure it's okay. And so therefore the adults go into a place where they're able to listen in a way that they don't normally get an opportunity to listen. And that means that they hear things that they don't normally get to hear. And some of those things are really distressing that they hear, but they're able to hear it, and the children are able to say it because they own the work, they own the conversation, and they trust the process because they've been involved in building and developing the process, and they know that they're surrounded by Unfearties. They know that they're surrounded by people who will step in if they need to. So if we're around a table, I used a slide yesterday with the children around a table with John Swinney, and staff are there at the table with John Swinney, but they're there for reassurance for the children. They don't have the conversations with John Swinney, and they don't say what he means is or what she means is. They don't interpret, they don't mediate. And I think creating that space where people can see that having that equality that you've both described really well is actually really empowering for everybody. And it takes a level of responsibility away from adults too, because adults can feel and see that children are not saying, we expect you to solve everything. We want you to go away now and solve everything. I've seen adults, directors of education with tears streaming down their face because of what children have told them. And then they've said to me months later, I just feel really terrible because I can't fix this. And I was saying the children don't expect you to fix it overnight. They expect you to have a dialogue with them and to keep them informed in this conversation. They understand that things are difficult, but it's that space that you create where it's level and it feels equal that I think an Unfearty network can promote. And I think I love the idea of just going out and asking children and asking adults, what can we do? What can we do? What can you do in your place?
Thank you, Cathy. This is all really, really interesting for us, I think, listening to you all. I love the examples that you're all giving about listening to children and the balance, switching the balance of power. I think that's really insightful for us. I'm wondering if for the Unfearties, that all the things, I think you've each mentioned something that I think as Unfearties in this group and moving forward as a movement, things like creating a safe place for us, being for us to be able to make mistakes and ask those daft questions, because as you said, I think, Cathy, children's rights isn't new, but it's new to a lot of us, and we're all on different journeys and learning at different levels. And it would be great to create that safe place for us to ask those silly questions and make mistakes. So that's something that you've inspired me to think about. I wondered if you've got a few minutes just to take some questions. I think there's some quite interesting questions in the chat. If someone would prefer to unmute and ask a question, you're very welcome to.
Hi.
Hi, Teresa.
Raised a hand. I was decided to be Unfeart and ask a question. So thanks so much. They're amazing presentations. So loads to think about. I was wanting to ask Maff if it was all right. So the idea about a public living room is, it's an idea that you can kind of get hold of, that it's just those three words, a public living room, kind of already gives you an idea about what it might be, and people feel they've got their living rooms at home that they're sort of thinking about, or places to go, that kind of thing. I just wondered, how long did it take you, or how did you arrive at that idea of the public living room being the thing that would help to create these spaces that people could then, create their own all over the place? And I also wanted to ask, what's in the box?
Now that would be telling, Teresa. I think you're gonna have to ask for one, and we'll send you it. And then I don't want to ruin the drama of opening it. No, I can give you a few hints, but well, I mean, it wasn't the first idea we tried, and for the first year and a half, we tried a completely different idea, and then we realised that wasn't sustainable. It didn't really work, and actually, there was someone in Glasgow doing it better than us. And I think more charities need to get out of the way when someone's doing it better. So we thought, well, they've got a better idea than us, and so we started looking at. But the idea of the public living room came from something that had been sort of haunting me for years, which is, where do you go in times of crisis? And I asked people where they go, and the two answers I got were GP and Costa Coffee. And I thought, well, I can't run a GP surgery, but when I spoke to GPs, they said they only get 10 minutes with a patient. And these people, most of them, they're very lonely. And as they're heading out the door in the 9th minute, they turn around and say, actually, to be honest, it's not my back or my knee. It's the fact that my life's rubbish and I'm depressed and I'm sad. So I thought, okay, where could they go? And then I thought, well, Costa Coffee, I mean, you can get a nice, mochaccino and a muffin, but, it doesn't do an awful lot for your well-being. So I thought maybe we could do that. So the prototype was originally, it was originally called What If Samaritans Ran Starbucks? That was the name of the prototype. So what we did was we took over an old space that we found in Sheffield, which turned out to be a garage for an undertaker. And he used to park his hearses there. But there was hot water in where the mortuary. So we used the mortuary as the cafe for the tea and coffee. And where the parked the hearses, we had to turn into a public living room. So you can do anything with 50 quid in a van. So what we did was we went on FreeCycle, and we just picked up sofas that people are giving away for free, but they need picked up, and pianos. So I put a piano on the street and sofas inside, and then Jenny, who I mentioned before to some of you, is an old friend who I started the movement with. She came up with the idea of fairy lights, because something happens to the human brain when you see fairy lights. You don't think needs and risk assessment. So she put fairy lights up, and then we put a blackboard outside that said top 5 David Bowie songs, come in and argue, and as a way to get people in. And what we had builders in high-vis jackets coming in, getting very het up about Jean Genie not being on the list. And then we had women who were shopping for shopping bags, and then we had homeless people, and we had students. And the homeless people felt that it was relaxed and comfortable and not intimidating, and the hip yuppies thought it was all very boho and cool. And so it kind of was an undefined space, and watching all those different people just get on, I just thought, I don't normally see that. Normally they go to their place. And so that's when we thought, I think this idea's got legs. So in the first year, our team just did it in a library, a hospital, a prison, a community centre, on the Brooklyn Bridge, all these places. And we learned all the mistakes, many of which we made. And then we put it in a box, and then we gave it out to 12 communities, and then they made mistakes. And then we made the second version of the box and the third version, and now it goes out to whoever, and they do it. It's open source. And what's in the box is just the stuff you need, like fairy lights and a bit of bunting and postcards and badges and a post box and a game of Connect 4. You got to have Connect 4. And an awful lot about our principles, because if you display the principles in the public living room, people sort of get the idea. But we try and do it without it looking like a notice. So yeah, that's the kind of gist of it.
Thanks so much. I'll be ordering mine.
Yeah, great.
That's wonderful. So I think I can't see anybody else with hands up. So what we're going to do now is just move on and listen to some children's voices and their ideas about what they think Unfearties should be and do. So we're just going to show a very short video before moving into breakout rooms with you.
We are here to take part of this year's sitting of the Children's Parliament. There's 47 MCPs from all over Scotland. We are going to share our experiences as human rights defenders with over 50 adults. These adults work for local councils, the Scottish Government, the NHS and charities. This is our chance to tell adults and children what they can do to defend rights in Scotland.
What's happening now is a small group discussion where we're talking about 4 topics. Why is it important that children are human rights defenders? Why is it important that adults are Unfearties? What can Unfearties do to make sure that children can be human rights defenders? What difference would it make if Scotland was a nation of human rights defenders and Unfearties?
All the ideas on the shields came from children all around Scotland, so we visited 5 different schools.
So beautiful, 5 schools and all artwork. When we talk about the human rights issues, the image is very negative or sometimes very depressive. Of course, we have a lot of human rights violations all over the world, but this artwork or 5 series send us such a positive message from the children, how they see the human rights and how they identify themselves as a human rights defenders and what they want from us adults.
I think it's been very important for me to be able to come here and be able to take part in these kind of events where you could speak to other people and have people that understand you. I think it's very nice that you could be able to come and know that someone's going to listen to you.
Yeah, it's good to hear the children's perspective about what they think Unfearties should be and what we can do. And just, I don't know if everybody's aware, but Makiko Otani, who was talking there and wearing her Unfeartie badge, is the chair of the Committee on the Rights of the Child. And it's great to have so many people who are Unfearties and whatever background that we come from. So that's just pointing that out. So now I think it's time to move into the breakout rooms. The purpose really of the breakout rooms is to give you some time in a smaller group and to be able to ask more questions, to think about the inspiring conversations that we've listened to, but also to have a takeaway. So we're hoping that we can come together and talk about our Unfeartieness promises that we might like to make in order to help us move forward with our Unfeartie movement. Okay, welcome back, everyone. That went really quickly. Time seems to be going very fast, but welcome back. I hope that was interesting and inspiring. Just before we wind up the session, I wondered if Cathy, Claire or Maff, you wanted to share a final thought, especially if you've been part of the breakout rooms. Is there anything you wanted to close the session with before we go into our Mentimeter activity?
There was one that occurred to me in my breakout room, which I shared, which was the importance when you're trying to start a movement, the importance of getting out of the way. I forget that constantly. I always try and get heavily involved and sort things and fix things. And the more I'm doing stuff, the less other people are doing it. And the idea of the movement is they're doing it. And you'll be amazed the way people work is that they're quite happy to just sit on their hands and go, oh well, Maff's doing it, it's fine, we'll just let him crack on, you know. So get out of the way. I find it really difficult because I get a huge part of my own sense of personal approbation from being there and being told I'm a good boy. You know, do not have to be there. Don't turn up. I guess the harsh way of putting it is it's not about you. A movement is about the cause and the kids in your case. So what Cathy was talking about, that the adults being there for reassurance only, was brilliant. But it's very, very hard to do that, to get out of the way. And having been an implementer and a project manager, I really struggled. But better things happen when you get out of the way.
That's great. Thanks, Matt.
I'm going to take my inspiration from Stuart, actually, who's sitting in the Children's Parliament bunker there in the wee den with all the amazing puppets and everything around him. And one of the things that Stuart said in our workshop was, in creating a movement, how do we find the things that people believe in, that they really set their hearts on fire? And, you know, how do we support that as an Unfearty movement? And I think if we can inspire folk, have those conversations about the things that they really believe in, that will really help us to generate that excitement around children's rights. Thanks, Stuart.
And I'm going to keep what Matt said, which was about change and movements coming from the tongues of poets, not through strategic plans. I mean, the team, my colleagues won't be surprised that I've chosen that one, but I think it's true. I think it's what inspires people, is when you see and you hear what other folk are doing. And I've really loved getting to know you, Matt, and the work of Camerados this morning. So we definitely need to keep in touch and share practice and hopefully maybe do something together. That would be brilliant.
I would love that. I'd be lying if I wasn't sat here with my brain firing on all sorts of cylinders about how I could be an Unfearty and wanting to join in, but I don't want to be presumptuous. But if you'd have me, I'd love to jump on a train and I'd love to come and hang out.
Great, we'll book those tickets.
That'd be amazing. So, Maff, you're very welcome to be an Unfearty. I think most people that have attended today have signed up, and if they haven't, that's what we're going to ask them to do. But we also have, I'm wearing sparkly silverish top today, which it seems a bit early to do that, but tomorrow is our last day for nominating what we're calling our unsung Unfearties. So what we're hoping is that we know there are lots of people, like what you've described, Matt, there's lots of people in the movement doing things that maybe we're not aware about, and they're doing great things. They're spreading the word about children's rights. They're really inspiring people to change hearts and minds, and we don't know about them. And so we've had this campaign called the Unsung Unfearties. We want people like yourselves to recognise the unfeartiness in others and let us know. There's a really simple nomination form. You can let us know about these people, and they will get a limited edition birthday Unfearty badge to celebrate their special unfeartiness and to celebrate their unfeartiness. So that's exciting. But the last day tomorrow to nominate. So if you know anyone, it could be your mum, it could be your sister, it could be your dad, it could be a teacher, it could be the dustbin man, it could be absolutely anybody. please do nominate, and they'll get a special badge.
Everyone loves a badge.
I'm so happy you said that, because that's our motto, I think.
Yeah. I'm just thinking, if it's all right to say this here, but do you know what our most popular badge is? So we have a badge just to be a Camerado, which is the C, but it's not the one that people get off the website the most. People apply to get a another badge. Excuse my language, but this badge says, "I'm a bit shit sometimes." And it's an incredibly popular badge because we have this principle, which is it's okay to be rubbish. And in Camerado spaces, this is a outcome-free zone. You don't have to be a success. You just sit in the rubbish with each other. And it's a great way to connect with people. They just see that badge and they go, "Me too, pal," you know.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Maff. So I think I just need to say thank you to Maff, to Claire, to Cathy, and all the facilitators in our breakout rooms, and all our attendees this morning for joining us. We're having a few technical issues, so we were going to share a Mentimeter and ask you for your final thoughts, really, about what you've learned about, or what a movement means to you, or to invite you to share your promises. But because of our technical issues, we're not going to do that, but you're very welcome to post anything you like. Oh, brilliant. You're very welcome to take pictures and post them or share them with us, or write your promise in the chat. Yeah, I'd just like to thank you again for all joining. It's been wonderful, really inspiring. Thanks, Maff. Thanks, Cathy. Thanks, Claire, for your time. That was wonderful.
Thanks for having me.
Great chat. We'll have to do this again.
Yes, please.
I'd love that. Thank you.
And thanks for the music, Maff. Thanks for the music, Maff.
Hey, no problem at all.
Man.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Take care. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.